Alright, so today I'm going to be going over a quick introduction to R. R is a statistical programming language. That means that you can use it to do statistics. You can use it for a bunch of other stuff as well, but it's primarily designed for running statistics. Right now, I'm using a program called Rstudio. Rstudio is a program that's designed to just make coding in R easier. It's got a lot of nice features. I highly recommend you download it if you haven't already. I'll put links to the download and instructions in the description of this video. So this part of Rstudio is called the console. This is what you would get if you just had plain R. It would only be this window. This is where the results for your code come out. When you first start up R, it will have things like the version number and a whole bunch of stuff. Don't worry about that. I'm going to clear it out. If you want to clear it out, you can do this with either Control or Command L, depending on if you're on a Mac or a PC. Now, the first thing you want to do when you're starting R and you're starting to do a statistical analysis is you want to open a new script file. You can either do this by doing File, New File, RScript, Control-Shift-N, or click this little icon and click RScript. This window up here, or this section up here, is where you type your script. The results will come out here. Now, R's most basic function is as a calculator. So it can add numbers. So say I wanted to do 4 plus 6. I would type that in, and then I would run that code. There are 2 ways to run the code. Well, 3 ways, I suppose. You keep your cursor on the line of the code that you want to run, and there's a button up here that should say run. It's hard to see because I zoomed in a lot so you could read my code. And you click that, and the result will show up in the console. The result will have the code that you ran here in one color. It's blue on mine. This is the theme that I chose. You can change the colors in Tools, Global Options. And the result will be in another color text below it. You can ignore this part right now. It's just saying where that result is in a list of results, but right now there's only one. There's only one result for 4 plus 6. I do want to note, just right off the bat, R doesn't really care much about spaces. I could take out these spaces and I would get exactly the same answer. I'm just keeping the spaces in there so it's easier for you to read. You can also do subtraction in R, so if I did 5 minus 9, I could do that, and I get -4. I can do multiplication, say 7 times 3, 21, or division, 2 divided by, say, 7, 0.285, so on. So that's the most basic function of R. You can use it as a calculator. But R is something called an object-oriented programming language. So typically, you're not just going to be doing equations and then just waiting for the results to pop up in the console. You're going to be taking equations and storing the results in an object. Now, before we get into that, I want to tell you about comments, because they'll help you a lot. When you're learning R, you should always comment your code. Comments are just little notes to yourself or whoever's reading your code so that they know what's going on, so that you know what's going on if you wrote this code like a year ago and you're coming back to it. And the way that you comment code in R, you don't want that comment, you don't want what you wrote to run, because it can do some weird stuff to R. So you put a hashtag before it. And that hashtag says, whatever else is after this hashtag on this line 6 of the code, don't do anything with it. It's just here for the human being's reference. So I can say, creating objects in R, because that's what we're going to talk about next. If I run this line of code, you'll notice nothing shows up in the console. That's just because whatever's after this hashtag does not matter to the computer. It's just there for humans. I could put an equation, like 4 plus 6 here. It won't run. Oh, I accidentally... See, this is what happens when you run the text without the hashtag. If I delete the hashtag, it gives me an error. It says it's just confused. Because in actually has meaning in R code, but it doesn't have any idea what any of this means. Alright, So like I said, R is an object-oriented programming language, so it involves storing things in objects. I like to think of objects as boxes, and they're boxes where you can take and store data or results. You can move them around, you can do things with the boxes, you can add the boxes together, all kinds of stuff. But first, how do you put stuff in boxes? Well, first you name the object that you want to put stuff in. In this case, I'm going to call mine box. No, I should call it box with 2 X's, just because it's good practice to not do something that's already in R, not overwrite that. And then to store something in that box you've created, you can do one of 2 things. You can either put an equals sign, or you can put an arrow. And that represents whatever is on the right here goes inside this object. So I'm going to put the number 8 in this object. I run that. It just shows me the code. It doesn't tell me anything, but up here you'll notice something in the global environment has appeared. The global environment essentially shows all of the things that you have stored in objects in your current R session. So it tells you the name of the object and gives you an idea of what's stored inside there. In this case, we only have 1 number stored in there, so it's pretty easy for R to display. It just says, this is an object called box, it contains the number 8. Sometimes you'll have 1 thing stored in a box, or an object. Sometimes you'll have thousands and thousands of numbers stored in a single object. In that case, you won't be able to just look up here, because it can't display thousands of numbers in that small space. So if you want to see everything in an object, you can call that object. And all that means is you just type the name of the object and run it, and R will spit out everything that's inside of that object. Now you can do a lot of things with object. R treats objects as if they were their contents, meaning I can add objects or subtract objects or multiply objects. So let's say I have another object. I will call this yodel, because why not? I can call it whatever I want. And I'm going to put the number 15 in that object. So if we call yodel, you'll see we get the number 15. Yodel's up here. Now we can add yodel and box. Now we could just do 8 plus 15, but sometimes we're going to be adding like thousands of numbers together, and there's going to be thousands in each object, and that would be a huge pain in the butt to type out, so I'm going to put a note here. We're adding objects. You can type the name of the object, so box plus yodel, and that will give you the results of the contents of box plus the contents of yodel. So 8 plus 15 is 23. And I think I'm going to stop here for today, but that is a basic introduction to R. We'll talk a bit more later, including how to store multiple objects or multiple numbers in a box, and how to do basic statistics like taking the mean or the standard deviation of a set of numbers.